Hi guys, welcome back to Pragmatic Politics. My name's Colby Cons. So today I want to talk a little bit about local elections. They are super important, almost just as important as the presidential election, especially when it comes to Congress and the House and Senate. And I live in Massachusetts, so I thought I'd address the very, very important Senate race going on right now in Mass. So right now we have two candidates, Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy. Joe Kennedy is one of the Kennedys. He's currently in the House of Representatives, and he's trying to run for the Senate seat against Ed Markey. Now the race is pretty close right now. I personally prefer Ed Markey, and I'm going to be pro Ed Markey this whole video for multiple reasons. First of all, just a little heads up, they're both Democrats. Both their votes on major issues will be similar. They're in Massachusetts, so we are a very blue state. Markey has been in the Senate for a while now, and Kennedy has been in the House, so it's a little difficult to compare the two. But Kennedy doesn't have a very long record in politics so far, so it's kind of hard to compare the two because Ed Markey is much older. That being said, I support Markey because he pushes progressive policies much more often than Joe Kennedy does. Ed Markey has been a leader as part of the Green New Deal, which is a very important legislature that needs to be passed in this country to combat climate change, a huge issue affecting the whole world. It seems more like Kennedy is running and trying to join the Senate as a step onto the presidency. Seems like he really just has presidential aspirations. And the only platform he's running on is that he's younger than Ed Markey. He has nothing really to say about. There's no negatives to Ed Markey or anything that he's a proponent of or supported in the past. So I don't know why he's trying to push to replace him, other than the fact that he's trying to make a presidential run. He is a Kennedy, so he does feel, like power is in his family's name. It's the heritage of the Kennedys. They have to be in positions of power in the U.S. government. And that's what he's doing here as well. I don't think Joe Kennedy's going to make the same progressive pushes that Ed Markey will, simply because I don't think Joe Kennedy will want to alienate moderates in other states for when he eventually makes his presidential run. Ed Markey only cares about the Senate seat. He has no presidential aspirations, so he's pushing for what he believes in, pushing progressive policies. Joe Kennedy's not going to do that. He's going to stick with the moderates, stick with the same old status quo, because he doesn't want any blemishes on his record. I see this as a huge failure because Massachusetts is a very blue state, and our senators are at a low risk of being flipped to, Republicans. And I think that we should be at the forefront of pushing progressive policies, being the fact that we are a very progressive state. One of the biggest knocks against Joe Kennedy that I have is that he was very against legalizing marijuana in Massachusetts, even medical. He did not want medical to be legal. And now that it is legal, he's kind of backed away, stepped back, saying, oh, yeah, I always support it. What are you talking about? I love legal weed. But in the past, before it was legalized, he was very, very against it. And he describes in an interview how much he hates the fact that weed has been legalized because, here's a quote by him, "If you smelled marijuana in a car, you could search a car. When it became decriminalized, you couldn't do that." This is very often a tactic that was used against people of color to search their cars. Black people were 3.5 times more likely to go to jail for using marijuana than white people, even though they had similar usage amounts. So this tactic to search people's cars just because they smelled marijuana was simply for police officers to use this as a way to arrest black people. And the fact that Joe Kennedy supported this and hates the fact that you can't search cars because the smell of marijuana is in them is not a good look for a progressive candidate. Joe Kennedy takes a lot of corporate donations from corporations that have very anti-progressive interests. Ed Markey takes a lot less corporate donations, and a lot less of them have ties to anti-progressive policies. You can look up this info on Ballotpedia where you can compare the two. You can clearly see that Joe Kennedy takes a lot more money from corporations. Kennedy also did not support Medicare for All legislation, which is super important. This is such an important progressive legislature that should be passed. I mean, it will help so many Americans, and as a progressive state, we need to be at the forefront of this. Ed Markey was an original co-sponsor of the Medicare for All, as well as the Green New Deal. He is very progressive. We need to keep Ed Markey in power. Now, I'm not saying that Markey is perfect. He has had a couple troubling votes in the past, but to his credit, Ed Markey has shown up for the fight for net neutrality, for climate change, for Medicare for All, and for legalizing weed. I mean, he's been on the right side of every single good piece of legislation. I mean, why are we trying to get rid of him when Joe Kennedy has been not on those sides? The fact that Joe Kennedy is trying to go for his seat instead of against a more conservative seat in the House, this really shows that Joe Kennedy doesn't line up with progressive values. Kennedy's best argument against Markey is that Markey spends too much time in Washington doing his job, which is in Washington, D.C., rather than spending his time in the state. If that's really the best argument that Kennedy has against Ed Markey, the fact that he's in Washington doing his job in the Senate, I mean, that's kind of shows that there is no real argument for the fact that we should replace Ed Markey. I mean, he's doing his job. I don't care if he's in Massachusetts. I want him at the Senate, there for Senate hearings, pushing legislature, doing his job in Washington, D.C. That's what I want out of my senator. I mean, I don't know how we can expect Kennedy to do a good job in the Senate if he can't even do his job in Congress correctly. Joe Kennedy literally voted for Trump to get more nukes, and he claimed it was accidentally. I mean, he joined Republicans in favor of fulfilling the request by Donald Trump for millions of dollars to start work on new nuclear weapons. I have the article right here. He literally voted yes that Donald Trump should get more money and start work on new nuclear weapons, and then claims it was a mistake. Like, how can you mistakenly vote? Your literal job is to vote. Why are you making mistakes? How can you accidentally vote the wrong way? It's terrible. Like, you want this guy in the Senate representing your interests? He doesn't even know what he's doing in Congress. It's ridiculous. My last real big knock on Joe Kennedy is the fact that, he's a top recipient of hedge fund donations, and he's declining to back the Tax Fairness Act. Senator Ed Markey is backing the Tax Fairness Act. Joe Kennedy has actively worked against it. He has refused to co-sponsor the legislation. What this legislation will do is end the carried interest tax loophole that is used by hedge fund and private equity managers. So, of course, Joe Kennedy, who's getting tons of money from hedge funds and private equity managers, doesn't want to close the tax loophole, which is literally working against progressive policies. We need the tax money from these big corporations so that we can better everyone's life in America. So that's my take on the Senate race between Ed Markey and Kennedy in Massachusetts. I think it's super important for us to go out and vote for Ed Markey. He represents all the interests of the working class and of progressive policies, unlike Joe Kennedy. And Ed Markey does not take money from massive corporations and hedge fund managers. Like, it's so simple. Ed Markey is such a great choice as a senator. He's made a couple mistakes in the past, but they're nowhere near as bad as the negatives that are on Joe Kennedy, who seems to be just running on his name in his goal to become president one day. I mean, we cannot have Joe Kennedy as senator. So pass this video around. Let people know Ed Markey for Senate. The election is September 1st, the primary. Please, everyone, go out and vote. We need Ed Markey in the Senate, not Joe Kennedy. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I put out multiple videos a week, trying to get out as much content as I can. I know I'm a new channel. Hit the like button on the video, helps a lot. I know I say this every time, every YouTuber says this, but it's because of the YouTube algorithm. It really helps a lot getting the likes. Thank you so much. More content coming soon.